That is the Hilula of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and it is also the day that our Rebbe accepted upon himself the mantle of leadership. Very special day for Chassidim. Before the Frierdiker Rebbe's passing, he released a mimer. The mimer was based on the words Basi Legani Achai Sikala, which is a pasuk from Shir HaShirim, in the 5th chapter of Shir HaShirim. It opens the 5th chapter of Shir HaShirim, and it means, I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. These are various affectionate terms that in the metaphor God uses for the Jewish people. And the mimer was 20 chapters long. The Rebbe's first mimer was based on the first paragraph or the first chapter of Basi Legani, and subsequently every year on Yud Shvat, the Rebbe would deliver a mimer that would be based on the next chapter. And this went on for the first 20 years until 1970, and then the Rebbe started all over again. Anyway, every year we study the original chapter that corresponds to that year, and today we're 10 years into the Basi Legani cycle, and as it's the 70th anniversary of Yud Shvat coming. So we're going to study together the mimer that the Rebbe delivered on Yud Shvat, 1960. Basi Legani Achai Sikala. I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. The first paragraph of this mimer will be really a recapitulation of the Basi Legani themes, the global garden themes, and then we'll move into the specific commentary on this year's chapter. The Isal Zeb Medrash, the Medrash tells us about this, Legani Lignuni. It doesn't say I came to a garden, it says to my garden, my bridal chamber. L'makim shahaya ikri betchila, the place that was mine to begin with, the place where I primarily dwelt. And this means, euphemistically, the ikr shchina b'tachtenim haisa. The primary dwelling of God's presence was not in the higher worlds, but rather in this lower world. That's known as the Garden of Eden. Because of the sin of the tree of knowledge, and the sins subsequent, the Shechina, the presence of God, was removed into the outer reaches of the heavenly orbs. Again, a metaphor. Ulumayla Yeser, and even higher, Ad L'Rakia Hazayin, until the 7th heaven or firmament, the 7th atmosphere, all euphemistic, all metaphoric, describing the notion that God's presence was no longer seen, felt, or known on planet Earth, in our terrestrial and everyday reality. And then the patriarchs came along. V'hatzadikim, and the supremely righteous individuals, they actualized or brought forth the Shechina from a higher outer realm into our realm, closer to us. Until Moshe Rabbeinu came, Shehu Hashvi, he is the 7th from Avram Avinu. V'chol Hashviin Chavivin, and all 7ths are dear, indicating that Moshe Rabbeinu had the special quality because he was the 7th from Avram. And Moshe Rabbeinu succeeded in concluding, in finishing what Avram Avinu began, bringing the Shechina into this atmosphere, into our reality. This is the meaning of the statement which is made in the Zohar and elaborated in the generation subsequent, that when a person crushes the dark forces, so by overcoming what seems to be insurmountable challenges in the service of God, the glory of God is brought forth or is revealed in all worlds, which means that through the efforts of the righteous, righteousness is not an accident, it's something that has to be worked at, something we have to toil for. And the natural way of things, or the path of least resistance, is one of sin and selfishness. So if a person is to be righteous, it requires iskafia. It requires restraining the natural desires, not giving in to the things which inundate us. And iskafia here in this mimer, the Rebbe says, is mevia lidei ishapcha. Iskafia, crushing that which one naturally desires, eventually leads one to be able to bring about transformation of those very same ideas and ideals and sentiments. And azai, when that's achieved, when you're able to rein in the natural desires and inclinations, when you're able to achieve supremacy over them by transforming them and redirecting them to a holy purpose, then you bring forth the glory of God, In other words, that nimshach madregas ha'or, that we have the level of light, shu b'chulu almin b'shava. Light, of course, is a metaphor. God is not a light. And the idea of istalik, all of these terminologies are metaphorical. We are physical terrestrial people who know of physical terrestrial things, and we're talking about things which are far beyond our everyday experience. We don't have really a frame of reference for this. So the metaphor that's used is light, and there are multiple reasons. Chassidus talks about why we use the metaphor of light. Not the smallest amongst them is the notion that light is that always connected to its source. Light travels at a certain speed. It's the most non-physical part, the most non-tangible part of our everyday reality. Photons are kind of part of this world, but at the same time very much not really a part of the tangible physical world. Photons being in a place doesn't mean that they're going to be there a moment later. It's not like the light really never separates from its source. So we call the energy, divine energy, we call it a photon. That's the metaphor we use. And here we speak about what kind of photons, what kind of light, what kind of metaphor. That there's this yikara the chulu alman, there's istalik yikara, the glory of Kodesh Brichu, and it's bechulu alman. It's in all worlds equally. In other words, it's something that's atmospheric. It's something that embraces all of the different strata of reality at once. And the Rebbe says here in this particular maimer, v'lachein nikra yikara. That's why it's called the word yikara. Yikara is Aramaic. If you take the aleph off at the end, it'll be the Hebrew for yikar. And you know it says La Yehudim Haisa Oyra V'Simcha V'Yikar. The word Yikar literally means beauty, and the word Yikara in Aramaic means something which is very precious. She's a Meira Al Goydel Inyan Yikar. This is a very precious light. This is a very deep and very profound level of divine light. She'erinza Prati. This is not an individual, a specific energy or light. Shekosher and Prati in Yonei Olam, which is linked or connected to a specific part of creation, but rather Shemitzadzeh. From that perspective of unique and separate, disparate parts of creation, yesh chilukim ba'olumus. That's why there are different realities and different realms and different worlds. Ad le'elam atzilus, till the highest of realms, the highest of worlds, va'elum esain seif, and the worlds of infinitude. So we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the light that's individualized. Simple metaphor, every one of us has a neshama, and the neshama is able to power our physical terrestrial realities to the point that we believe that the neshama has the power of sight and the power of digestion. The neshama has the power of thought and the power of emotion. There's all these different powers. It's a conglomerate of all the different powers. The neshama, of course, is more than those powers, but it contains and is also comprised of all these individual powers. However, it needs to have a mechanism, it needs to have a convention to animate in order for a person to be actually able to see. You need the physical eye. If the eye is to be broken or damaged, God forbid, then the light or the energy of the neshama, which enables sight, is not effective. You need to have a physical ear. The mechanism has to work. Maybe sometimes they build a cochlear implant. They can build things. They can do things that replicate or mimic what the body would have done if the body was healthy. But if you don't have a convention, if you don't have a vessel, if you don't have a machine, if you will, that's actively doing the job that it's supposed to do, so then the energy that's in the soul will not be animated. In other words, we have, in the language of Hasidic lexicon, Oiris and Kalim. You have energy, and then you have the vehicle that carries the energy forth. Just like a person can have sentiments or ideas, but they don't have any words. So they're sputtering, they can't communicate. And then when they find words, able to use those words, able to communicate, so the words become the vehicle, the wagon in which they're able to send forth, or they're able to travel. The sentiments can travel from your heart to somebody else's heart and mind. And that's the idea of an inner light, or a light which needs a specific vehicle or a specific reality, a frame that can contain it, that can hold it. So that's one way in which God powers our world, and that's called the Oir HaMemala, the light that fills or matches and marries itself to different parts of reality in different worlds. And then there's what we call the atmospheric light. The atmospheric light which bathes all in the same fashion, like the notion of life itself. The toes are no more or less alive than the nose. It's all alive. The person is alive 100%. And that's the light we're talking about here. When a person performs an act of sacrifice, of commitment, of dedication and devotion to God, which is known as iskafia, by reining in one's natural desires, by crushing that which comes easily, by traveling the path of greater resistance, and ultimately bringing about transformation, then you draw forth its atmospheric light. This atmospheric light is very, very precious. And hu gavaya mikol alman. It's loftier than all worlds. V'nimshach b'shava l'chul alman. It's drawn forth equally into all worlds. And it's this light we're talking about when we use the Hebraic or Aramaic terminology, istalik. That's the meaning of istalik. It's not a regular movement. Istalik is not when something moves from one level to the next. It's kind of, it lifts off. It's a very refined form of traveling. Because this very lofty revelation is called b'shem istalik. It's as if the light doesn't travel, the light materializes. Kimavur b'makam acher, as is explained elsewhere. And the Rebbe actually refers a reference to a mimer that he delivered earlier that year on Pashas Bereshis. So this materializing of the loftiest level of divinity in our realm happens through the efforts of tzaddikim. I know what you're thinking. Oh, tzaddikim. We're not tzaddikim. We don't even know any tzaddikim these days. Well, the Rebbe adds right away the pasuk of Yeshayahu who says, V'amech kulam tzaddikim. When we say tzaddikim, really every one of us is included in that terminology. Shehem poyalim, that it is each and every member of Am Yisrael who affect ha'inyan, the basi, ligani, lignuni, who affect this idea, who have the ability to bring about or bring forth the highest light of divinity, sheyachzer l'makim shahaya ikri ikir dirasei, that it can return to the place where God once primarily was. Dihine, inyan hadira, when we say that God is going to dwell amongst us, that's the terminology used. He's a dira. He's going to dwell in our world. Shabon nimtza ha'adam, that's the place where a person is found. Leirak bekechesav hagluyim v'anistarim. Not only that a person is expressive there, a person is at home, so he drops his inhibitions, he lowers his guard, he's not role-playing, he's not assuming a persona, he's himself. He's acting in a natural way. But it's more so, it's not just make yourself at home. When you're really at home, it's ba'ifin shigam etzem ha'adam dar badira. The person himself is there. The person himself without any kind of expression. It's not even the most personal expression. It's not even an intimate expression. It's the person himself. It's the person stripped of all externalities. Even more intimate, more personal externalities. If a person is home, that's who the person really is. Who really knows who a person is? People who live with the person. People who are in the person's house. And this is a metaphor, of course, for God. When we say that God is Dor, that God dwells in this lower world. This is the meaning of Dir B'Tachteinim, that in the lowest worlds, Nimtza, Mahusei, Vatzmusei Yizbarech, the essence of divinity is to be found in this world. Zehu, and this helps us now understand Shayidei Iskafia, that through that Aveda, through those efforts of Iskafia, Istalik Yikar the Kutchubrichu, the Chulu Alman. The glory of God materializes in all worlds. Shenimshach Oir Hasevev Kalamim, that we have being drawn forth or actualized or materializing before us the atmospheric light, which is no longer just atmospheric, but here it's Bechulu Alman B'Shava, but yet it's resonating with a sense of revelation in our realm. We're talking here, even the Rebbe says, till so much the outer reaches, the Seviv Hamiti, which is Mehusiv Atzmusa. We speak here about nothing short of the essence of God Himself, that God Himself, whatever that means, is Dor Ba'adira. And all of this is explained in great length in the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe in the preceding chapters. This is all just the preface. So now we come to this year. This year now we come to the 10th chapter. And here is the Maimer, the way the Rebbe elucidated it in the year 1960. The Maimer now continues B'Sif Ha'asidi in the 10th chapter. And the Rebbe notes that Ha'asidi, the number 10, is invariably associated with a special level of holiness. As we know that when a farmer, a rancher, is raising sheep or goats or cattle, that he has to tithe them, but he doesn't choose the tithe, not like Truma, not like the Hiv offering, not like Meiser, which is given to the Levi, not like any other form of tithing. Here the animals are placed in a corral, a small door is open, and the animals themselves begin to escape. And the 10th one, regardless of which one it is, the 10th one is deemed to be holy. As the Gemara says, it could be a blemished animal. We don't get to choose. So 10 and holiness go together like French fries and ketchup, even if there's no effort that's being made. The Rebbe says, how much more so when we're putting effort into this 10th. So the number 10 is connected to holiness. And here, the Rebbe now quotes from the beginning of that 10th chapter. This is the actual verbiage that the Frierdiker Rebbe uses in his Maimer. This then is the meaning of the pasuk of the verse which is found in the beginning of Parshas Truma, in the middle of the book of Exodus, when Moshe Rabbeinu instructs the Jewish people about the building of a traveling tabernacle, a sanctuary for God. He says, "You will make for me a migdash, and I will dwell amongst them." Of course, this refers not only to the traveling tabernacle, but ultimately to the Beis HaMikdash. And more broadly speaking, it refers to each and every one of our lives. As our rabbis teach us, B'soichoi loy nemar, it doesn't say in it, because Migdash is singular. It should have said, Vasli Migdash, one Migdash, V'shachanti b'socho, in it. It doesn't say that. It says, B'tocham, amongst them. You started off speaking about one sanctuary, you ended up speaking about many sanctuaries. And the rabbis explain that that means B'soich kol echad v'echad. That means to dwell in the hearts of each and every one. The b'chol echad v'echad, in the heart of each and every one. Ka'asher mahapech mechashecha l'nehira. When you do your part of transforming darkness into light, your part of transforming concealment of God into the opposite. And every one of us can do this. That's the mission God gave us. So when we do this, do your job, fulfill your mission, great and amazing things will happen. The presence of God will be known in our world. He continues the Frierdiker Rebbe in his Maimer, and he says, "V'zeu basi legani lignuni." This is the meaning of my garden. L'mokem shaya ikri betchila, to the place I primarily was, the tchilas hakavana, that the original intention of briyas v'hisavas ha'ilamos, of the creation, the bringing into existence of worlds, u'mashenasava kadosh baruch hu li yisloi yisbarech dira b'tachtenim, is the notion that God wanted a dwelling place on earth. That's what this is about. That's what it's about. Now the Rebbe is going to start to talk about this idea, the language that's used here. That it says nis'ava. Nis'ava comes from the Hebrew word which you're familiar with, of a taiva. A taiva is a desire, a craving. People get cravings for certain things. Some people get cravings for food and they eat too much. Some people get cravings for a moment of happiness and joy and do all kinds of crazy things to try to get it. It doesn't really make them happy, but they feel these lusts and these desires of cravings for moments of libido that they convince themselves are really going to make them happy. What they're really looking for is happiness. What they get is a temporary release of serotonin, which makes them happy for a few moments, and then they're unhappy again. And then they feel that they want more, so they go back for more of the same, but it doesn't really work because it's not what they need. And that's how addictions get formed, and they get addicted to things which don't make them happy anyway. But anyway, it all begins with a craving. It all begins with a craving. And surprisingly, we use this terminology about God. We said God had a craving. God desired. God desired? What do you mean God desired? What kind of desire, what kind of craving is this? So the Rebbe says that really and truly, the craving, the divine craving, is an inyan naila yesa. It's a very deep and profound thing. It's a very deep thing. It's a very profound thing. Now let me just tell you, not every craving is unhealthy. There could be a craving that a person has for spiritual fulfillment. That's not a bad thing. There could be a craving that a person has to feel of value, to feel needed. And that motivates a person to be kind and generous and giving to others. Is that a bad thing? It's a craving. There was a craving. There was something that motivated that. A person could have a craving to experience fulfillment of life, and that is what pushes them to take the leap and to get married, and to make a family, to build a family, to devote themselves to children. Where somebody can logically say, who needs it for? You want to live together, have fun. You don't want to live anymore, move on. Who needs it? What do you have to get married for? What do you have to build what do you build a family for? Kids drive you crazy, they take up all your money. Who needs it? And people say things like this today. So what motivates a huge amount of the population to still do something which many will claim makes no sense? And they say, it's not going to make you happy. It's all about you. You need to be happy. You need to be fulfilled. You need to do what you want to do. And everybody talks about you and I a whole day. But in fact, that's not really what we want. And deep down, people know that. So they have a craving. They're craving something greater than I. They want something more than you. They want something more than that. That motivates all kinds of amazing things. That's what makes the world go round. So when we talk about cravings, I don't use the word lust, but the word talk about craving, a person has a very, very deep-seated thirst and yearning and desire for something. It's not necessarily bad or negative. It could be a very positive thing. It depends what the craving's for. We have good cravings and bad cravings. Of course, God is all good. So God's craving it's for the creation of the world. This is a very, very deep and profound thing. It's more so even. So this is an idea, a spiritual idea, which is talked about in the writings of the Arizal, where people try to figure out, using Torah terminology and Torah logic, based on what God told us to His prophets, why in heaven would He have created the world? Who needs this crazy world? Where people deny the presence of God, and there's barely anybody who's actually even looking for God. So what did He create it for? What was He looking for? What did He need? Why couldn't He have angels? The angels behave, they just do what He wants. Why have a world that's filled with rebellion? What was God looking for? So one of the things the Kabbalists came up with, based on revelation and tradition and understanding of prophecy and the words that God told us, that God, since we're created in God's image, and every one of us wants to feel fulfilled, every one of us wants to see our talents, our abilities fully developed, that God, as it were, has a delight in seeing the fullness of possibility exhausted, where God can create worlds that not only know Him, but God can create worlds that don't know Him either. And then God can stimulate freedom of choice, which would hopefully take us in a direction where a world that didn't know Him comes around to knowing Him. And it's because God created these creatures who have the freedom of choice, who ultimately did the right thing. And it's a shleimus. It represents perfection or fullness in keiches and pulis, in talents, if you will, in wherewithal, in ability, and in possibility. And that's like a logic, a Torah logic, a spiritual logic, a mystical logic for why God would have created the world. And then there's another logic, another idea, which is also talked about in the writings of the Arizal, that the creation is mitzad teva hatov lahitiv. Now, the notion of shleimus kechesav u'puleisav is actually a logical thing. It's not illogical. If you come to a person and you said, "I think you have tremendous ability in a certain area," the person says, "Really? Wow, I didn't know that." He says, "Yeah, you really do." But here's how you can develop those talents. People, you'll get their attention. Now, at some point, they'll figure out you're lying to them, and they'll stop responding. But if in fact you're telling them the truth, and if you really did notice something, that's just trying to manipulate them, and if they really do have certain ability, and you demonstrate to them how they could develop that ability in a full sense, you will get their attention. They'll be listening to you. And they very well might actually do what you're trying to get them to do. That is, after all, what a good teacher is all about. Not about simply pushing information on pupils. Nothing's gained by that. A good teacher is a teacher who demonstrates to the pupils that they have the ability to learn, and that ability is something that they can develop in a fullest sense. And he excites them with that idea, so that they want to learn. So they don't just have information that the teacher pushed at them, but instead they learn how to assimilate information, how to analyze information, how to develop information, how to retain information, and so on and so forth. How to educate themselves. That's what real education is about. So on one hand, if we say that God seeks shleimus kechesav u'puleisav, that's a logical thing. Then we go into nature. What is nature? Nature is something that we'll do without knowing why. We don't really understand our nature. It's like an instinct. Why did you react that way? That was my instinct. People have different instincts, and some instincts are universal. And it's not something which necessarily makes sense. You could argue to somebody that instinctual response was actually unhealthy. And they maybe say, maybe you're right. Maybe that wasn't the smart thing to do, but it was the instinctual thing to do. In other words, nature is something we do without rhyme or reason, not because we understand it. The point then is this. These are two reasons, if you will, or explanations as to why Hashem created the world. Either the logical one, shleimus kechesav u'puleisav, which we can understand. Then there's the idea of nature, that the nature of good is to give. And the Rebbe says that both of these reasons, the teva hatev lahitiv and legalis, shleimus kechesav u'puleisav, all of these are answers to our question. What was the question? The question is, why did you create the world for? So that's the answer. Here's two answers to the question. Ve'ilu inyan denesava hu mimakim kazeh sheleshayich inyan shel kusha. The notion of God's craving is not a response to a question altogether. As the Alter Rebbe once said, "Ifataiva is king kasha." You can ask questions. Why do you crave this? It's not a question why you crave this. You crave it. Why one person craves it, one likes it hot, and one likes it cold. Why? I don't know. It's not even a question. The craving isn't a response to a question. The craving is a fact. It's the way it is. In other words, inyan de nisava, the notion of nisava, God's craving, hu mitzada atzmos, is something that comes from the very deepest essence of the divine persona or psyche, if you will. The deepest essence of divinity. V'lachein nemar haloshen nisava, and that's why we use the lashon nisava, which nisava is an expression, the profoundest expression of God's oneness, of God's essence. Mitzada atzmos, b'nigei l'inyan hadira. When we speak about all kinds of things, we don't use the terminology nisava. We don't use, we say God craved angels. God wanted angels, God created angels, God desired angels. We don't say nisava. Nisava is the terminology we use only once. And the only time we use this terminology is for this world. Ki inyan hadira, because the dira, the dwelling place, is not for God's external reality, not for the role-playing level of the divine, but rather for atzmusa yumahusa, the essence of God. In other words, my dear friends, this project that we have the privilege to be part of, known as creation, a project that was set into motion by God some 5,780 years ago, is all about the actualizing the deepest essence of God in this world. And that's something which is connected to the deepest essence of God. We are connected to the deepest essence of God. Our mission, our purpose, is actualizing the craving, the desire, if you will, the intense desire of the deepest essence of God, which the deepest essence of God is that His presence should be felt and known here on this planet.
Is that from the pasuk Asuli Mikdash?
That's ultimately the meaning of Asuli Mikdash. That's the meaning of V'shachanti. Because V'shachanti, dwelling amongst them, as the Medrash explains, means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the dira. He wants the dwelling place. The pasuk V'asuli Mikdash says that you and I are God's partners in this. That we are the ones who are actually bringing about the Nisava. God has this desire, and we are the ones who make it happen. So that's a privilege. The privilege of doing this was given to us. That's our choice. And when we make the right choices, that's what happens. So we're negotiating, if you will, with the essence of divinity. We're not dealing with external realities of God. No matter how marvelous and glorious and magnificent they are, that's what the angels deal with. We deal with the essence alone. There's a famous little story. Let's tell a story. The little girl is on the beach, and she's waiting around there. And somebody says, "What are you waiting for, little girl?" And she says, "I'm waiting for this huge battleship to come by. I know it's going to come by, and I'm going to wave." And the man says, "Who are you going to wave at?" She says, "At the admiral, the commander of the whole battleship. He's going to wave back at me." And she says, "You must be kidding. You think the commander of a battleship who has 4,000 sailors under his command, and you think he's waving at you?" And she says, "Yeah, I'm absolutely certain of it." And he says, "How are you so certain?" She says, "Because he's my father." So we're talking about Hashem as a father. We're talking about the essence. There's something that touches the essence. And that's something that we have the ability to relate to. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with nothing short of the essence of God. And here the Rebbe is now going to introduce us to a phenomenal idea. Most people say, don't be ridiculous. You are dealing with the essence of God. The essence of God, cares about what you say or don't say. Get real.
Sorry, what was the connection? The
Basi Legani, I came to my garden. It doesn't say Basi Legan, I came to a garden. It's all a metaphor, right? The Shir HaShirim is a metaphor. It's this love song metaphor. So God says He came to my garden. It doesn't say He came to a garden, He came to my garden. Legani Lignuni. The Medrash says, Gani Lignuni. No, the port of garden didn't become my garden, it always was my garden. It was our secret rendezvous place. In order to understand this idea that we have now advanced and promulgated, the notion that we connect to the essence of God, that Dira Yizbarech talks about the essence, that Nisave talks about the essence of divinity. This will be understood al Piteris of Baal Shem Tov, by virtue of a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, which is found in the book Keser Shem Tov. That the Baal Shem Tov said something shocking. As a rule, humility is something we can never get enough of. Can never get enough of humility. In fact, the Rambam says you can never be too humble. And the Baal Shem Tov came along and he said, not so simple. That sometimes when a person is too humble, but humble in a negative way, and you'll see what that means in a moment. That humility causes him to fall away from the service of God. How could that be? How could humility turn a person away from God? Shemitzad shiflusai, because of his or her lowliness, and we are lowly. But the person, when he's acutely aware of his lowliness, he cannot believe that through his puny actions, through his study of Torah, and through your prayers, that you're able to affect all the worlds. Get real. I'm a little menshela, and a very little menshela amongst menshelach, a small little person who's greedy and capricious and mean-spirited and selfish and all the other negative things. And you're very humble. And you're very humble. You know all of your shortcomings. And they are real and they are many. It's true. It's true. And so, who am I? Who am I? Who am I to serve God? My Torah makes a difference. God cares if I say this davening or I don't read this davening. If I did, what difference does it make? I'm a nobody. I'm not an important person. So mitzad shiflusai, because a person in his mind sees himself as insignificant, because he's so humble. So he says, if I'm insignificant, then my efforts are insignificant. My contribution is insignificant. And because my contribution makes no difference anyway, why bother? It's a waste of time. It's silly. It doesn't make a difference. The Gam Ha'Malachim, we are also taught that the angels are nizaynim ha'idei tfilasei, that angels are nourished through a Yid's Torah, through a Yid's prayer. If he would believe this, if you would believe that your prayers, that your Torah study literally makes a whole wide world of difference, then how joyous would you be in your Avodas Hashem? And how much would you feel a sense of satisfaction and the reverence, and you would serve Hashem with joy and with awe, with it, you would be overwhelmed by it. You would be so excited about this opportunity. But instead you say, I'm just a little person in a little corner of the world. Nobody really cares or thinks or knows about me. I'm not making headlines. It's nothing. It's a little davening. And if I am there, and if I'm not there, what difference does it make? Okay, my mother thinks I'm special, but that's about it. Maybe my spouse thinks, maybe they don't think, I don't know. Do my kids value me? I wonder sometimes. I'm a nobody. I'm a phantom. I mean nothing. Here today, gone tomorrow, nobody would even know the difference. And you're going to tell me that my efforts and my avodah makes a difference? So he's very humble. But this humility, says the Baal Shem Tov, is debilitating. It doesn't elevate the person. It demotes the person. It makes the person think that he's doing nothing. But if you would believe in what Torah says, that your Avodas Hashem literally makes a world of difference, oy would you daven. You would learn Torah, it would be unbelievable. V'gam lasei slave, and also to give heart, al masha nemer tishkevum bein sfatoyim. This is a pasuk which is found in the 68th Psalm. And it literally means, I lie on the oven top, on the stove top, which is not the stoves of today, which are stainless steel and spanking clean or beautiful glass, but the stove tops of once upon a time which are covered with soot and filthy and dirty. So the literal meaning is tishkevum bein sfatoyim, is like sfitat hakdeira, is the place where you put the pot on the fire. But another allegorical interpretation of this verse is Sha'akadosh Baruch Hu, not you, Shomer v'shoiked al sfas ha'adam. God is actually dwelling on the lips of a person. L'noishka, to kiss you on the lips. Kishu oimre b'Torah v'tfilah. When you say words of Torah, when you say words of prayer, then God is as if proverbially kissing you. Ki zehu ha'isha shelo yachzenu reses. Miza ha'isha, Baal Shem Tov says, who will be the person who isn't seized with trembling? Sha'amelech gadol v'neira, that the great and awesome King, Shomer v'shoiked al sfasayim shel adam, is on your lips. He's on you. He's listening to you. Every word you say is invaluable. Therefore, a person has to give heart and pay attention. Every single movement, everything he does, every diburi, every time a person speaks, opens his mouth and says something, he makes an impact on high. Every time. Are we back online? Yeah. every single word that a person says. No? Every word a person says has an impact on high. I can make a difference. I am valued on high. Come on. And in doing so, because he feels that he is insignificant, and because of humility, he just does as he pleases. This is similar to what our sages tell us, that it was the humility of Reb Zechariah that caused the Churban, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. I'm sure you know the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. He was invited to a party, and the wrong guy got the invitation, and he came, and the person who made the party threw him out. And the sages said nothing. And he was so angry, this person, that he decided to take vengeance on his own Jewish brothers. And he told the Roman emperor, the Caesar, that the Jews are revolting against him. And he says, can you prove what you're saying? Send him an offering. And he sent an offering, and he made a small blemish, a blemish which in our laws was considered a blemish in a korban. And in the rules of the pagan offerings, it was not considered a blemish. And there was a whole discussion, what should we do? What should we do? And so we should just bring the korban, because we don't mess around with the emperor, with the Caesar. And Zechariah ben Avkulas got up on his feet and he said, if you do that, people will say you're allowed to bring a korban with a blemish. They said, maybe we shouldn't rub this guy out because he's threatening the whole nation. And Zechariah ben Avkulas said, you can't say that, because then they'll say that a person who makes a mum in a korban should be rubbed out. In the end, nothing was done, and the Caesar took this as a sign, and he came with his armies and destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. That's how Jewish history unfolded tragically. So the Gemara says, the humility of Reb Zechariah is what caused the destruction. What exactly does this mean? Maratz Chaya says that he could have just ruled, could have been stout and broad shoulders and say, this is the halacha, I'm finished. But he said he was vacillating. He couldn't bring himself. He didn't feel he was worthy of making up psak halacha. According to other opinions, that we find in the Eicha Rabbah, Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas was one of the people at the meal. And he was horrified when he saw this person thrown out, but he felt so humbled. He said, who am me? I'm going to stand up and stop this guy. And because of his humility, he ended up causing something negative. So the Rebbe analyzes this Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, and he says, from the fact that the Baal Shem Tov concludes with a reference to the Gemara in Maseches Gittin that talks about Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas and talks about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the Rebbe says something so unbelievable now. Listen how the Rebbe interprets his teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. The Rebbe says, so then roll it the other way. If we connect the idea of untold humility, of untoward humility, of inappropriate humility, which is a bad thing because it disables somebody from serving Hashem, and we bring a proof from Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas that his humility caused the Beis HaMikdash to be destroyed, the Rebbe says, if so, when a person is behaving appropriately, which is the opposite of misplaced humility, then it's Heipech HaChurban. It's the opposite of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And what, my dear friends, is the opposite of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash?
The creation of it.
The building of the Beis HaMikdash. There's a Beis HaMikdash. My Zayde Hecht, Alav Hashalom, was a young man. It's 1944. The world is on fire. And the Frierdiker Rebbe is emphasizing and cajoling and pushing his Hasidim and disciples that we need to do spiritual we can do. Whatever could be done in Europe was done, which is very little could be done. But the American Jewry was drowning in assimilation. And my Zayde got married, and he went straight out to start a school in Boston. And he told me it was Sunday morning, a bright New England Sunday morning. He set out wearing his new chasana coat. And he's going to knock on doors and try to get people to send the children to a Jewish parochial school. Knocks on the first, these guys walking along, and two kids walk by. One of them says, "Good morning, Father." And the other one says, "Why do you call him a father? He's not a father. He doesn't even have it. He's too young even to have any children." And making fun of him. The one thought he was a priest. One comes to the first door. Lady opens the door. She no solicitations on Sunday. Slams the door in his face. Comes to the next door. He gets an equally frigid response. After a few knocking on doors like this, he says, "This is not for me. I can't handle this." He wrote a letter to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he said, "I'm respectfully submitting my resignation. I'm coming home to New York, and I'll find a normal job." So the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote him a letter. Anivus shalei b'mkeima, humility in misplaced, Yeseidasa b'gasas ruach, is rooted in arrogance. That was the letter he got. So he told me he got this letter, and he was knocked flat for a few days. He was like, and then he picked himself up. He said, "I dusted myself off. I got to work," and he built a school which still functions today. So the point is, misplaced humility is not a good thing. Something has to be done. The person says, "Who am I? Who am I? Who are you? Who are you? You are who you are. Do what you got to do." Because I'm not going to do this. So when a person doesn't have that misplaced humility, but a person seizes the moment and confidently does what has to be done, not only if Zechariah ben Avkula's lack of confidence, if his misplaced humility caused the Beis HaMikdash to be destroyed, then it means if a person would have the right amount of confidence and believe in himself. Torah wants you to believe in yourself. You build the Beis HaMikdash. And that's actually what it says in the Maimer. V'zel v'asli mikdash v'shechanti b'seichem.
What was the source that said that you should be very, have extreme humility or whatever?
It means humility in its right place. Not humility that says, who am I? I'm going to do these things. Yeah, Torah says you are going to do these things. I could make a difference on heaven. Yes, Torah says you could. So you think it's humility, but it's humility coming from the wrong place. And it's in the wrong place. And this is the meaning of Asli Migdash V'Shechanti B'Seichem B'Seichel L'Nemer Ala B'Seichel Echad V'Echad, as we learned, not in it, but in everyone. And now the Rebbe says there's another thing here. She'af B'Tchilas Teres HaBaal Shem Tov. Not only the end of the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov is revealing, but the beginning is also revealing. It explains Sha'aveda Sa'adam B'Teira V'Tfila, that the efforts a person makes in the areas of Torah study and of prayer, brings about a transformation in all worlds, even in angels. Then he goes on to speak not about worlds, not about angels, but then the Baal Shem Tov says, HaMelech Gadol v'Neira, the awesome and great king, Shemer v'Sheked As Fasayim, is waiting on your lips. Shalom. For the person who's medaber divrei Torah, who speaks words of Torah Tefillah, Melech Gadol v'Neira Daika, not just a king, a great and awesome king. From this is move on, Shakavone hi la'atzmas HaMelech, that we refer to the essence of the king. K'fi shahu l'mayla mimelech alam, not the way the king is engaged in actual sovereignty, in providing for the citizenry. Elabes nasus atzmis. We speak here about the king, the way he is an entirely exalted state. Because the essence of kingship is vested in the very core of the greatness of the king himself. Malchus is higher than the other spheres of Chesed and Gvura and Teferes and Netzach and Heid. Malchus is the last. That through a person's efforts, he's stimulating Melech Gadol v'Neira, the idea of Malchus. What this is in the language of Chassidus called Hamshachas Ha'atzmos, the drawing forth of the essence of divinity. If he would only believe that his efforts make a difference, then he would serve God with great joy. Like it's known in the commentary of this verse, serving God with joy and gladness from the great abundance you have. This is similar to what our sages said. One moment of return to Hashem, one moment of spiritual yearning, and then translating that into good deeds in this world is more valuable mikol chaye ha'olam haba, than all the world to come. The whole world to come doesn't compare to one moment of spiritual yearning that is properly harnessed and actualized in this world. In other words, chaye olam haba abechinas kol. That's kol. Kol is all. The whole thing. The loftiest forms, the highest forms of fulfillment and pleasure. Skip the parentheses. Therefore, that one moment is greater. B'tshuva ma'asim tevim, mereiv kol more than kol, meaning kol chayil mahaba. Because when you do a mitzvah in this world, you get hamshachas ha'atzmos. That's how we draw the essence of God. It's very lofty, the other world. Gan Eden is a very lofty place. But this world is where mitzvahs can actually be done. And this is the meaning of what he says as he continues in the Maimer, Shetchilas HaKavana, B'Brias V'Savas HaIlamas, that the beginning of it all, what stimulated the whole notion of creation, what God desired a dwelling place in this world, Shehu Inyan, that this represents, as we explained at length, Hamshachas Ha'atzmos, the essence of God. The very essence. Because of this desire on God's part, that's why the Aveda gets done with the boards of wood, which we talked about in the Mishkan. There were these boards. The word shittim is connected to shtus, which means folly. And the atzei shitim should be oimdim, should be standing. The dugmas amudim, like pillars, shemechabrim esaritzpa im hagag, which connect a very tall ceiling with the floor. Shehu inyan chibur olam esem elikos. That's a metaphor for connecting divinity with the world. Acha olam nasadidul is barech, so that the world might become a dwelling place, lemahosei v'atzmusei, to the very essence of God. And that is part 1 of the Maimer Basilagani version 5760. No, 5720. So that's Tavshin Chaf. So this is the part 1 of it, which emphasizes the idea of us understanding, knowing, and believing that that global garden is necessarily within our purview, and we can make a world of difference. And when you believe in yourself and believe in what you can do, and you do it, this brings about a world of transformation.